that was a driver for me to get that first deal done, to make sure I build this portfolio correctly, I set things up correctly, and make sure that I am able to bring that why to fruition for me. Like, it's my guiding light. It's everything I do. It's not a vanity reason. It's nothing more than I just want to be with my family more.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the 0 to 100 podcast, where we are all about cash flow real estate, time freedom, and choices in life. We use the vehicle of real estate to generate enough passive income. When I say passive, that means we're not fixing toilets at night. We're not flipping properties. We're not land banking. We're not doing all that stuff. We're all about using the vehicle of real estate to achieve time freedom. And I've got my co-hosts with me, Mitchell England, Gabe. We actually saw each other last week. It was a pleasure to see you, Gabe. Can't say the same for Mitch. And we also have an amazing guest on today. Grant Francke is with us. And man, I love when we get guests like Grant on, because he's like, man, meat and potatoes, exactly what we're all trying to do. And he's using real estate to sort of achieve the American dream, or the great equalizer. And so I'm going to get in his bio here. Grant is a successful real estate entrepreneur who built an $8 million portfolio from humble beginnings. He only has a high school education, and his determination and keen eye for investment opportunities allowed him to leave his railroad job to manage his properties full-time. His experience in finding, financing, and managing profitable real estate has established him as a respected figure in the industry. And Grant shares his hard-earned insights in the book, The Unlikely Investor, to help others achieve financial freedom through real estate. So if you like the 0 to 100 podcast, you like what we're doing, you like our book, and you want to read a better book, there you go. You can read Grant's book, The Unlikely Investor. There's some stuff in the book that he talks about that we're going to learn, which I didn't want to get into in this podcast, about uncovering hidden opportunities. We talk about that sometimes because everybody's like, I can't find deals. And we always like, well, there's this concept, sort of finding gold in plain sight. The one thing I don't understand about your bio, though, Grant, is you said that you only have a high school education, and I thought we had to have an Ivy League bachelor's degree or an MBA with hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt and social studies classes and stuff like that to be successful. I scratching my head. I was told that's what I had to do. I don't understand that. Yeah. So anyway, man, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Appreciate it. I'm excited to be here.
So Grant, real quick, what did you do on the railroad? My dad worked for the railroad for 37 years, and I'm just curious. I know that life from the child's perspective, but anyway.
Yeah, so I was a conductor for BNSF Railways. I hired out when I was 19, right out of high school, pretty much, and did that for about 13 years until I left to do it full time. So yeah, I was a conductor. My dad was in the railroad as well. He was on the maintenance side, so it was kind of in the family to go do that.
I'm curious about how you go from, railroad to real estate. I mean, I don't think that's a common story. Obviously, your book, The Unlikely Investor, I'm just curious about that story. Like, how did real estate get on your radar?
Yeah, so it really was like Mitch probably knows, like, the railroad lifestyle is not great. It's awesome if you don't have any kids or you don't have any family, but you're gone a lot throughout all out hours, nights, weekends, holidays. You're gone for all that stuff, which was fine when I was single. When I was married, it was kind of okay. But once I started having kids, I was like, man, I got to find something else to get some income. I was chasing what I thought was financial freedom, but like you guys talk about it, it was really the time freedom that I was looking for, to be around for my family, be around for my kids, being more involved in my community, those sort of things. So we started looking for something. I was looking at everything. I was like, I'll be a postman. Like, I just needed out of that railroad lifestyle because it was not healthy for you personally, mentally, physically, all that stuff. So I was looking around for everything. Stumbled upon a few podcasts, and then read Rich Dad Poor Dad, the little purple book that everybody talks about. And then after that, it was just a mindset shift for me of like, I can do this for myself and not work for an employer. That led to more real estate education, and then I was off to the races.
You were on the railroad, and you have kids. It wasn't financial freedom you're looking for, it was time freedom, which I love that. And you started looking for alternative investments. By the way, my dad was on the railroad he did it for like a couple months, and he got out. And I'm not speaking for all railroad people, but a lot of guys that had been there for 40 years were kind of salty.
Yeah.
Not if you're a railroad salty employee, I apologize, but they were they were curmudgeons, and maybe because they spent the last 40 years sort of beholding to schedules and being off and away from their family and stuff. So, but you mentioned like you started looking, and then I missed how real estate popped up on your radar.
Yeah, so I was looking for everything. I was like, I'll go work as a postman. I'll go do whatever I need to get out of that lifestyle. Then I stumbled on a few posts. Like I've always been somewhat handy, but not like really handy. So I was like, I'll go be a handyman or a GC or something. I found a post that said like the best in customers for handymen is landlords, because you keep them busy. They keep you busy. And then I found a podcast, a Bigger Pockets podcast, where a handyman became a landlord. And then he referenced a book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. So I went and read that book, and off to the races from there.
That book is just, I mean, we hear that constantly. And that was for me, I think all of us started with that book. It's like, you just take the red pill, man. It's like, my brain was spinning after that book.
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't really into reading books beforehand, but like after that, I was like, I felt like that book was written for me. Like it was like, it just spoke to me. I was like, it was just a mindset shift. I just looked at the entire world differently after reading that book, which is crazy to say. It's just like, it's not a real story. It's just it's a book that just kind of changed your mindset.
Grant, it's crazy, but I mean, that was my exact experience too. I didn't read a book like all through high school until, I was 19 and I read that book, and it was such an aha, because it just answers so many questions that a lot of us don't even know we have. It's just another way to look at life, look at, finances, look at, creating a life of financial freedom and time freedom through real estate, through business. That book's changed a lot of lives for sure.
So Grant, you read this book, you were still working for the railroad when you read it. Is that right?
Yeah. So I read the book in 2015, and then we bought our first rental in 2016. And then I didn't leave the railroad until 2019 is about the time I left.
But you didn't read the book while you were on the train, though, right? Because
I probably did. So you can stop like when we stop. So like from where I'm at, Lincoln to Kansas City is like a 3-hour drive. That takes us 12 hours on a train because you're stopped for so much waiting for other trains. So you sit there, and I read a lot of books and listened to a lot of podcasts while I was sitting on trains.
That's cool. So you read this book, and then you decide, I'm going to buy my first rental property. Well, by the way, once you bought that first rental property, you just separated yourself from 1% of the people, because a lot of people read the book, and a lot of people get the mindset, they take the red pill, they all of a sudden the clouds part, and they look at life differently, and then they go back to work forever and then die at 70. I'm sorry, that was condescending, but so like you took action, and like tell us about that. Tell us what that looked like. So
I read the book, and that's when it just got instilled in me. Like there's a different way to do this. There's a different way to go through life. So I started getting a lot more to the education. That's when, Bigger Pockets was in its heydays. Listening to Rich and Kathy Fedke and Keith Weinhold and all those people, just getting as much information as I could. I started reading more books. And so that from 2015 to, I think it was August of 2016, we bought our first rental. It was just a basic duplex in Lincoln. That was on the MLS, just a little cash flowing deal. But the first one's always the most difficult, as everybody always says. But once we got that one down, then it was just, we were off to the races.
Same thing. So this first duplex, I love how you said the first one's the hardest, because we have people inside Elite or School Scale where they're just like trying to break through. But once you see them break through, they get some momentum. So maybe talk about the first deal, but then what was the next deal, and how quick after that first duplex did that come?
Yeah, the first deal was just your basic stuff that's on the MLS. It was just a duplex, up down duplex. I got a 30-year note on it. It was a good little base hit, but like looking back, financially it wasn't that important to me, but like mentally and showing myself that I can do it, going through those steps, closing on that property, it was a life changer for me, because I knew I could do it again. It wasn't that difficult. Going through the process is extremely difficult the first time, but once you get on the other end, you're like, well, that was that tough. I can do that a lot more. So yeah, it was a very basic deal. My next deal was another duplex that I actually found on Craigslist back when that was a thing. You could find properties there. It was actually happened to be a retired railroader that was selling a duplex. So I hit it off really well with him. It was a great transaction. I showed up, I closed on time, all that stuff. So, and then my next properties are actually I bought from him as well. We were at the closing table, and I had been looking around on the assessor site, and I knew he had 5 other properties that were clearly cash flowing rentals. So I told him, I was like, hey, if you ever want to sell these, let me know. I'd love to purchase them from you. And he actually offered to sell or finance me the package of properties. So that was my next set of properties came from him as well.
I was going to ask you how you finance those. Grant, you may or may not know, but that's also how I found the majority of my seller finance deals, 09 through 13. It was almost all Craigslist. And it was several investors that had multiple properties that started to sell off multiple properties to me with seller financing. I didn't know that about your first couple deals.
I should have stopped. I should have not used Craigslist as a dating site. I should have been like you guys and actually like buying properties.
Is that where your wife came from?
No.
Grant, what are the terms of those first couple seller finance deals look like?
Yeah, the package of 5 single families we bought from him, it was 10% down. I think we paid 5% interest, and there was a balloon payment due in 5 years on that. So it gave me some time to get them fixed up.
And then have you refinanced out in the long-term debt on those?
Yeah. So funny story. So he was selling his properties because he wanted to go to Florida and be a retired real estate investor and railroader. He called me about 2 years later and he still had the bug. He found a property he wanted to buy. So he asked me to go to the bank and try to refinance out of them, which I was able to do because within that time frame, I was making the improvements to those houses, raising the rents. So when I went to do my cash out refinance, I had enough proceeds on that to actually pay 2 of the properties off and just had debt on the 3. So we still own those today. Those 2 paid off properties are a line of credit we use for going after other stuff now.
Was that takeout debt that you did on the portfolio? Did the banks, did they do a portfolio loan for you? Or did you have to go get individual like Fannie, Freddie, 30-year fixed notes for each one? And they did like a market comparison. They didn't give you like an income approach appraisal, et cetera.
Right. It was market comparison. So actually I had the option to do a portfolio loan or go for the Fannie and Freddie. I opted for the longer term. So I went with the Fannie and Freddie and got 30-year notes on those 3. Then we still have those today.
The rates were, if you did that maybe a few years ago, maybe the rates were really good.
Yeah, I think we've got like 4% on them. It was like 2019, 20 we did it. So.
Wow. Oh, 4%. Do you remember those?
So nice.
So these are all 30-year fixed.
Right.
30-year fixed.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And 4%. Yeah. That's such the debt alone is an asset. So a couple things to unpack. First of all, you mentioned something I don't want to gloss over. We always talk about the mindset hack being like get around people that are doing big things, and another mindset hack is just to go freaking do something. Yep. Like you mentioned, like it might have been a few $100s a month in positive cash flow, but the millions that you're going to make or have made just by buying that first property and proving to yourself and others that it is possible and that it is more impactful than anything else, probably from a mindset perspective. The second is, and Gabe says this every once in a while, I'm going to reiterate this, is relationships, right? Like relationships, like you showed up, you did what you said you were going to do. You operated with integrity with this seller and you bought one deal from him. And the next thing you know, you were able to truly scale quickly. So mindset and relationships. Wow. I think we've said it a few times on this podcast before.
Yeah, super important. And I've had other deals, in the past couple of years that have just come from relationships, from closing one deal or being the neighbor to a deal, and they own the partner or the property next to me, and just being a good human and showing up and doing things right gets you a long ways.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Grant, I'm curious, about that first deal. It didn't take long from reading Rich Dad Poor Dad to taking action, taking down that first deal, and then obviously led to a second, a third, a fourth, a fifth deal. And I think Travis mentioned it as well. Like, but why is it that so many people, they read that book or they listen to the podcasts or they read other books and they don't take action? It's like the knowledge is there. Like, what do you think separates you and other successful investors that actually take that information and take action on it versus those that do not take action, even though they hear the same thing?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I have a couple answers. Like first, like I had a really strong why. Like I knew why I was doing this. I wasn't just going out to do it just to do it. I was doing it because I wanted out of the railroad today. I wanted to spend more time with my wife and kids. So that was a driver for me to get that first deal done. It's still the driver to me today to make sure I build this portfolio correctly. I set things up correctly, and make sure that I am able to bring that why to fruition for me. Like it's my guiding light. It's everything I do is for that reason. It's not a vanity reason. It's nothing more than I just want to be with my family more. I think the second reason, and I can have this happen to myself too, is like I can self-sabotage myself really quickly. and make sure things aren't going to go right in my head. So I think fighting through that is very difficult. And getting through that first deal helps you get through that next deal and the 10th deal.
So I got a question. And I love that. I love that answer, by the way, like being super self-aware and getting that first deal adds a lot of confidence. So in 2019, you said you left your job at the railroad, right? Did I hear you right? What was that moment like? Where was your mindset? Because the railroad has like one of the best retirements, I understand. And that feels like a bit of golden handcuffs. A lot of guys are like, don't leave, never leave. So like, what did that look like? What were your other fellow railroaders saying? What was your wife saying? You know, like maybe describe that time frame.
Yeah, it was the most terrifying thing I've ever done for sure. But like my wife was 100% on board. She's an accountant. So we had spreadsheets and like we were tracking everything. We knew what number of cash flow I needed to get out of there and make it work. So my wife was 100% behind me on that. My dad he got on board. You know, he's a retired railroader too. He's like, man, it's a good pension. I was like, I know, but I didn't see you, you know, from when I was 8 to when I was 18. You know, that's not what I want to do with my kids. So, and then the fellow railroaders, you know, it's just tough. You know, like you said, there's not a very happy group of people all the time. You know, they see me having some success, you get some angriness out of that. But I just ran into a couple, you know, the last couple of days, and they all just said how happy they were for me that I got out when I did, and I'm enjoying life a little bit more.
As I understand, I won't bash BNSF too much, but as I understand, things have changed a lot over the last couple years as well. So,
well, Grant, I had a question for you. So, if you've listened to this podcast before, which I'm sure you've listened to every single one of our episodes, I'm sure you're fanboy on us all the time. And I'm joking, but we talk about R1 being retirement number one. It's where you have enough passive income off of your real estate assets that basically replace your day job. When you burned the boats, essentially. In 2019, did you have enough cash flow essentially to basically retire, like replace your railroad income, or was it like it's enough time to get my 40 hours a week back because I know I can fill the gap, I can meet the delta quickly because I know what the hell I'm doing now?
Yeah, it was enough. I didn't have enough to like I could just be done, but it was enough to get me out of there. And I had the momentum behind me. I saw the hockey stick coming. I was like, I know I can scale this if I have that extra time. And we also, like my last year at the railroad, I went to the lowest paying job. I bid because it's a union job, so you can bid around. I bid to the lowest paying job, so we shrunk our income that year beforehand. I was like, if we can survive off of this, then we'll be golden.
Oh, that's interesting. I like that strategy. So you chose the lowest paying of jobs you could at the railroad to see if you could live off of that. Obviously, you could. And then once you stopped working, I'm curious, like, how did you allocate your time? I mean, I know you had a very strong why, and that driver was to spend more time with your family. You also have big goals to invest in real estate and take down more deals. So I'm curious, you know, you went from working full time to all of a sudden no job. Like what did your day look like? What does your week look like?
Yeah, it was. I was still at that time, you know, 2020 or 2019, 2020. I was still doing a lot of the work on my properties myself. So I just went all in on turnovers. I gave a few notices to vacate out just because, like, I know if I get in there for, you know, a couple weeks on this property, I can get more rent out of it. So I kind of created more work for myself, but it was stuff that I was putting off while I was at the railroad because I just didn't want to deal with the time suck it would have. And then COVID hit and everybody was home for way too long. And so that was kind of
Did COVID hit Nebraska?
Yeah, I mean, it was here. It wasn't as much as probably California and other places.
Yeah, to unpack something like for our listeners that think that you can't do this quickly, keep in mind, like you started reading the book in 2015 and you were able to quit your job in 2019. And I want to get into where you're at today, but like that's 4 years, man. That's not a long time. And I think people, they sort of relegate themselves to, man, I can't, like, this is going to take years and years and years and years. And like, and there's a lot of people that do have a few assets and they're each generating a few $100s a month in cash flow and it's meaningful. But, you know, I always say it's like a hot water heater breaks and there goes all your cash flow. So is there a trick? Is there, like, if you were to sum up a tactic on how you were actually able to scale meaningful cash flow to replace your income? Because, you know, people on the railroad make decent income, probably at even the lowest paying tier. If someone was to ask you like, hey, Grant, like, I have a few houses, they're each generating a few $100s a month in cash flow, but I can't see through the trees on how I'm actually going to be able to quit my job. If you were to sum up that tactic, what would that be?
Yeah, I would. If somebody's got a few houses that they've held for a long time, I'd be curious what their return on equity is on those things. Like a lot of people let equity sit and just kind of die and not get used correctly. So, it's a scary thing, but I would rather, if you have a couple houses and you're watching that equity creep up and that cash flow, why not take that equity and spread it out a little bit and then watch all those properties raise up a little bit? That's kind of, when we did that refinance on the 5 houses, really is what set us off for that. We had a lot of equity. We could go out, get different deals, start by paying cash for stuff and refinancing out and starting that snowball, that debt snowball.
We just got back from our in-person 0 to 100 mastermind in Scottsdale. And this was a topic that kept getting brought up, was the return on equity. It's something I didn't look at for like over probably 15 years, because I was like, I'm buy and hold cash flow investor, until I realized almost all my wealth was built in long-term equity growth and appreciation. But you looked at that early on. I mean, I like to call it dead equity, right? Or, unused equity. It's almost like phantom, lazy equity, right? So, but you looked at that pretty early on and realized, okay, you have some equity. Let's put that to work. Because that was what it sounds like.
Yeah, absolutely. And I saw what the equity sitting there, and it feels good to have that equity just kind of sitting there like, oh, it's worth this much and I have this much debt. That's awesome. But I can't buy groceries with debt, with that equity. You know what I mean? So,
well, something else too, and is the velocity of capital. We talk about this in the tribe. Like Mitch says this all the time. Like if money's not moving, it's sitting stagnant. And, it's like energy. And this isn't a cult topic. Yeah. This is like for real. Like you want money to be moving like energy in and into properties and out of properties. Also, like you use daisy chaining strategies, which we talk about in our book. How you bought one duplex, and then you leverage your relationship to buy a portfolio, which then you've got equity and you tap that equity to then multiply. So what happened? What did you do with that equity? You refinanced, you pulled out a bunch of cash, which by the way, people don't realize he pulled out cash tax-free. So it's using debt. He didn't have to write a big check to Uncle Sam so they can go blow it, which is what Uncle Sam does. They're really good at that. So what did you do? Like, what did you do with you kept the duplexes. I like that. I did want to touch on the fact you had a couple duplexes that you used as basically a bank or a line of credit. So what was your strategy after you refinance? What'd you do to go scale? What do the assets look like? Where were they? How big are they?
Yeah. So, I just had that line of credit against those 2 paid off properties. So I would be able to go out. We did it 2 or 3 times a year. I would just buy a place for cash, do the BRRRR model, then cash out refinance, pay off my line of credit, and then I have solid debt on one. And you just keep doing that over and over and over. And it takes a while you're in it and you can't really see through the trees. But then once you get done with 3 or 4 of them, you're like, holy smokes, that's a significant amount of cash flow. And I don't have any of my personal capital in those properties.
Are you still using that strategy today, lines of credit on those free and clear homes?
Yeah, so I still have that line of credit. So if I have like a down payment I need to get out quickly, I'll just go against that. Or if we have something we want to pay cash for, yeah, we'll go against that. What we're looking at now is a little bit bigger that I can't just use that line of credit to pay cash for it. But yeah, we still use a line of credit often.
I like that strategy. I don't think we've had too many guests talk about. I mean, I'm familiar with it, but we haven't had too many guests talk about that.
I have a small line of credit on my primary. I've had it for, I don't know, 5 or 10 years, and I've used it several times to get into different properties, especially when I was starting out, very, very cash poor. And in fact, Gorge Base Camp, it's a $500,000 win. I went in with 52 off the line of equity. I think it's a great tool because when you're not using it, you're not paying on it, right? And so anyway, awesome point. I love that.
Well, I think, Mitch, you've, again, leveraging equity that's sitting there. There's a few ways you can do that. You can put a line of credit on it and you can then get that equity moving for you, and you can add assets that then you can either hope you can get the appreciation benefit from. But or you can do like what Mitch did. We bought a property and then he actually collateralized my house on it. I'm joking. But but if you have equity too, and if you're doing owner notes and things like that, you can get creative, and maybe you have, an owner note that, maybe he's not or she's not completely happy with the position he's taking with the asset you're buying from him. So then maybe you sweeten the pot by offering up your house or other assets as collateral. So yeah, equity can be accessed in a few different ways.
Grant, what does your portfolio look like today?
Yeah, so we're just over 120 units, all in the Lincoln, Nebraska area. So Southeast Nebraska. We've got a few small college towns around there that we invest in as well. But it's all small multifamily, those single families, duplexes, 4, 6, up to a couple 10 plexes as well.
So walk us through, I mean, we got to you did that first duplex and you did the 5 seller finance deals. Then you're using the line of credit off the 2 free and clear homes to go buy more real estate. Talk about how you scaled then from those 6 properties to 120 units, because that's really our audience. I mean, that's the name of this podcast, 0 to 100. You've done it. I think for a lot of people, yes, that first deal is challenging, but then it's that mindset of like, all right, how do I go from 1 to 10? How do I go from 10 to 100 plus? So I'm curious, you have those 6 properties and then what?
Yeah. So I started doing some direct mail, and it's not direct mail like everybody talks about where you send out 20,000 letters and see what sticks. It's very targeted to certain owners that certain properties that I like. I was targeting owners that had large portfolios that would maybe want to sell off 1 or 2. I wouldn't target somebody who just had 1 duplex, because then they would have to sell their entire portfolio to me, which might be scary for them. So I was targeting some of those people. I got a hold of one owner that we bought 3 sixplexes from him. And it was just like my other deal. Like I showed up, I closed on time. Great transaction. I still talk to him to this day. We've golfed together a few times. So we were able to scale it that way. But then because we showed up and we did things right, he actually referred 2 more sellers to me, and we bought another 20 some units just from that one letter that we sent out. That one good transaction we had, that one good relationship led us to, over 38 units.
Wow, that's amazing. Were those also seller finance deals?
No, those are traditional. Well, not traditional. We just did commercial debt on those.
Grant, when you talk about the lettering, I love that how you're like, no, it's very specific to these specific owners. What did that letter look like? I know you don't have to say the exact script, but like you found this owner where, and you knew they had this portfolio. How was that? And then what did that letter look like?
Yeah, so I spend probably too much time on county assessor sites, just snooping around at who owns what. So I was doing that for this area that we wanted to go to. And my letter is very disarming. It's just like, hey, I'm an investor. I'm not a broker, not an agent. I'm just looking to scale my portfolio. If you ever want to talk about it, just let me know. This is my number, my email. And then I put a picture of my family on there. I feel like that's kind of disarming. Like, it's like, I'm just like you. I'm just an average person that just wants to scale my portfolio, which we've had fairly good luck with that. I mean, I'm not like, we haven't had 50% hit rate or anything, but the deals we've gotten from those have been very fruitful.
It's probably handwritten as well, I'm guessing.
Yeah, handwritten. And then I sign it and hand address the envelope, all that stuff.
Grant, what you just said you wrote is very similar to the verbiage I used when I used to call these potential sellers on Craigslist. I would say, hey, I'm local to the area. I'm not a broker. I'm not an agent, right? That alone, because a lot of investors get phone calls and letters from agents and brokers wanting to list their property. And so what you said reminded me exactly almost to what I would say. I said, hey, I'm local guy, live in the area. I'm not an agent. I'm not a broker. And that actually allowed a pretty decent conversation, because it does disarm that, like, hey, I don't want to list my property with you.
Yeah.
And it becomes a little more face-to-face, human-to-human versus transactional.
Yeah. And one thing I do include there too is, like, if I have a area that I have like a fourplex in, I'll be like, hey, I own this building at 146 Wedgwood, right down the road. This is me. You see how I take care of my property. I'm a real person. I'd love to purchase your property if we could.
Well, I think people forget that business is a people sport, right? And you mentioned it earlier. You sent one letter out, and out of that, you got a great deal because you were a good person. I like you said that. Be a good person. Mitch and I argue about that quite a bit because he struggles in that area. But no, I'm joking. But like, be a good person. Do what you say you're going to do. Right? Have integrity, and then also, like, in a transaction, I say this a lot. If you approach a transaction through the lens that everybody has to win, right? I win, the bank wins, the seller wins, the tenants win. If you have investors, they win. Then it's a very frictionless business, and it feels really good. And you did that. You showed up, you did what you said, and then he introduced you to other sellers, which is crazy. Like, you must be a great relationship guy, man, because a lot of people see this as and I hate the word transaction. Like, we need a transaction coordinator, because it's not a transaction. It's teamwork. And so Like, what do you do anything to really foster those relationships and build those? Or are you just like your genuine self?
I can't say I do anything like outside of just being a decent human being. Like I try to end every transaction with the intent that I would do another transaction with that person, or they would refer me to somebody else. That's happened to all of them, but like one transaction wasn't smooth. But I try to end every transaction that I want the person to feel good about it. I want me to feel good about it. So we're not taking advantage of each other. It's going to be a win-win, and just help everybody out.
Can we talk about the deal that wasn't smooth and maybe why?
Yeah. So it's actually my most recent deal. So it was a deal in Lincoln that got brought by my bankers to me. And it was just, the guy just wouldn't give on anything. He was a very stubborn person. And I don't want to say too much bad in case he's listening, which I don't know if he is or not, but it was just a lot of heartache, a lot of hard work, some extensions just to get to the finish line of, where we needed him to come down a little bit. And he was not willing to do that at all. He ended up doing it. It just took a lot more work and stress than I needed to.
And you never work with a guy again. Mitch and I just had this situation. Actually, one of our elites brought us a really good deal. We were working with them on. And this, like, I see this sometimes where these sellers, and I'm going to get around to like educating people that are listening to this. They sort of get this, and it's mostly dudes. I hate to say it, but they get this sort of posturing, this like, I got to win, and I'm going to big boy you, and I'm going to show you. And like, again, we were like, I just don't, Mitch and I are to the point, we're lifestyle guys. Like, I just don't want to deal with your shit. And I would rather not get this deal than have to deal with an asshole. And it goes back to, again, educating our listeners, just be a good person. Don't be difficult. Everybody needs to win. And you could have referred to more buyers it could have been a relationship that was fruitful for everybody, but he had to big boy you, and here you are. Like, you probably will never work with the guy again.
And he's got a large portfolio in Lincoln, and I would love to purchase some of those properties. But I mean, I was willing to lose my earnest money deposit and walk. I was just so frustrated with this guy. I was like, I don't even I want this transaction to not go well just to get back at this guy. But I went back to being a good human, and I closed, and we got it done.
Yeah, you got it done. Grant, I'm curious, do you have partners on any of your properties? Do you raise capital at all, or is it just you and yourself?
Yeah, so my wife and I own probably about half our portfolio all ourselves. We've got a few duplexes we own with like family. Some of my brother and sister-in-laws, I brought them in early on, and we did some of those BRRRR deals with them. Otherwise, we do have a few capital partners that come in. They're fairly silent in the deal, but some of our bigger deals, we do have capital. I've never like went out and done a syndication where I've raised money. It's all family and friends that want to invest.
And are you borrowing private money and paying them interest, or are they actually equity partners in some of these deals?
Most of them are equity partners in the deals. We do have a little bit of private money out there, but there's a few of them that are high net worth people that kind of wanted some tax problems solved. So they came in along with us for that reason and the cash flow on top of it.
Oh my gosh, you mentioned the tax thing. That's something we don't touch enough here, especially as we're getting into December and tax season. Real estate. Ugh. So when you buy these assets, do you normally do a cost segregation study? Are you taking accelerated depreciation? And yeah, okay.
Yeah, we do all that. And we just closed on a $1.7 million deal this year. So I'm very excited for tax season next year. We haven't closed on much in a while just because it's been slow. But yeah, that depreciation and those write-offs that you get are, it's not a reason to do a deal, but it makes the deal a lot sweeter when you do it.
What does that deal look like? The last one you closed?
So yeah, it was 17 units in Lincoln. That was the one with the difficult seller that we had. Mixture of 2-bed, 1-bath, 2-bed, 2 baths. Just your workforce kind of class B plus housing.
Why was he selling the property?
He was 1031ing into a new build.
Okay, so he was kicking the tax can down the road and mitigate. Okay.
So do you see yourself moving more toward larger multifamily? I know it's like the last one was 17 units versus a duplex. Like, where do you see yourself growing into, or are you happy where you are? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, I go back and forth. I go to these 50 events with Gabriel, and I'm like, oh, and I listen to him talk about his triple net leases, and I'm like, that sounds really nice after having 120 tenants, So we kind of go back and forth on what we want to do. I don't have any, want to do the big syndications where I'm out raising a bunch of capital. I like boring real estate, so if I keep pulling down cash flow in fourplexes, that's great. If there's a 17 unit deal like I just closed, that's awesome. If I could branch into that triple net lease stuff, I'd like to do that too.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we like the bigger deals for the force appreciation. We talk about that a lot. Where it's for those of you that are listening, 4 units and lower, awesome, man. This guy's like Grant's crushing it with 4 units and then bigger units. But the value of that asset sort of depends on what the value or what sold recently in the area. Whereas like that 17 unit, you could bring some rents up to market, you can cut out some expenses. And without getting into the formula, for every annual dollar of profit you create, you increase the value 10 to 20 times. So you can start controlling that appreciation trajectory, which then you can tap in that equity, which leads me to my next question. Have you done a recent, because you own a pretty substantial portfolio, and I'm assuming you have substantial equity in this portfolio. Are you starting to look at the cash on equity in your current portfolio? Is that something you assess all the time and then redeploy that equity via 1031 exchanges or potential lines of credit?
Yeah. So it's just something we started doing again. We've always tracked it fairly well. Like I said, my wife's an accountant, so she can do a spreadsheet for about anything. But this last deal we did, the 17 units, we sold 2 duplexes to 1031 into that. So it's some of those ones, those first ones we bought that have, doubled in value. And I mean, the cash flow is great, but there's a lot of equity sitting there.
And those examples, what was your cash flow on the duplexes? And then when you 1031 exchange, what was the new cash flow off the new assets that you rolled into?
Yeah, so it wasn't like proportionally correct, right? So like our cash flow about doubled when we 1031 from the 4 to the 17. So, per unit it goes down, but you're kind of restarting that clock, that shot clock on it. And then we're going to watch the appreciation getting the expenses. And I've really done what I could with those duplexes as far as renovations and pushing rents. At that point in time, it was just going to be the slow build then from there, where I couldn't force something to happen really quick on them.
That is a key trick to scaling quickly, is like, I think you hit it on the head. And that's just something Mitch and even you and I need to do more of. Like, we're talking about a property that we had that I think we're sort of we've done all the what we call the lazy reposition. We've improved the net operating income. There's not a lot of room to go on rents. It kind of is what it is, but we're sitting on 50% leverage. So if we really wanted to accelerate our cash flow, which is what we're all about, because cash flow equals time freedom, it would behoove us to look at that asset and potentially sell it into a 1031 exchange. Although 1031 exchanges are always a little, you pucker up a little bit with those, right? Because you've got 45 days to identify, and then you have 180 days to purchase. Have you found it? Like, do you have a strategy on 1031 exchanges to sort of mitigate the risk on the timing risk with those?
Yeah, so I've got a few agents in my pocket that I kind of let them know, like if I'm getting close on a deal that I'm going to close on or, get under contract, I'm like, hey, just if you got something in your pocket for these 2 duplexes, like maybe start calling them and say they might be available, just to kind of, because I'm not like, if I'm a 1031, I really don't want to throw it out on the market and then try to get in a bidding war and get 17 different new investors to come look at it and not close on it. If I can get a pocket listing that's maybe a little bit less than going on the market to get that 1031 done on time, I'm going to take that.
By the way, new investors, go talk to a guy like Grant who might want to do a 1031 exchange, but want to dispose of a couple duplexes. A great starter for you. You win. You can redo the cost segregation study and start the clock again on the depreciation. Grant gets to move on and buy a bigger asset and double his cash flow. Everybody wins. So people always think like there's no deals. Well, everybody's got a reason for selling, and those reasons differ.
Like if I would have gotten one of my letters in that time frame where I'm getting close to that deal, I could have called that person, but like, hey, I'm actually ready to sell one of these now if you're ready.
That's a really good point. And I love the letter concept just being like more specific, more personable, versus you see these guys go out and go, well, I'm doing like 5,000 letters a month and they've got a bunch of, anyway, it's really impersonal. So maybe talk about a little bit about your book, Grant. I know writing a book takes a lot of work, a lot of sweat and blood. I don't know if we'll do it again. It's a ton of work, but
yeah.
Maybe talk about that. Like, what's the mission behind that? What are you trying to accomplish with your book?
Yeah, so I'm really just like a big goals person. I set goals every year and quarterly, and then so my goal for this year was to write a book. That's really what it came from. I started in about December and wrapped it up in June. It launched shortly after that. So it was really just based off a goal, to show my kids like, hey, like you can do anything you want. Like I'm a published author. My book's in their library at school. I go on these cool podcasts. Like they love listening to the podcast. So I did it for kind of brand awareness, just to be able to say I did it, but like also to show my kids like it's it's just a cool thing for them to see that, and like their pictures on the back. So it's fun for that reason.
That is super cool. Grant, if somebody read your book and they said, this was my biggest takeaway, what would feel good to hear?
Yeah, that's great. So like when I started writing it, so the book has like the nuts and bolts of real estate investing, right? Just like a lot of the other books of like, this is cash flow, this is how you manage it, this is how you find a tenant. And what I really found that I enjoyed writing about the most was the mindset part of it, was finding your why. Because like, that's why I'm so passionate about my why. Like, I really think it's super important for people to know that, because like, as you guys know, things are going to go wrong. Pipes are going to freeze. Tenants are going to be tenants. So if you have your why behind you, it makes the whole process so much easier. So if someone came to me and said, hey, the first half of your book where you talk about mindset, goals, that was so impactful to me, that would be awesome, just because it's been so impactful for me on my journey.
We literally have an avatar for people that we're looking at that might join our elite program, which is our mastermind. And we say they have to have a burning why for time freedom. Like if you don't have and because like you said, when the going gets tough and there's friction and pipes are freezing or like in Mitch's case, he's got a dog shitting all over his unit and, like all the things, like you have to have a pretty big why, right? A pretty strong why. And your why's always been the same. I also would encourage other people. Sometimes your why differs. My why when I started out in life was, and we actually write about our why in our book, was really unhealthy. It was to just basically beat all my peers, and it was ego driven. Now it is definitely for family. I got a question for you. So like, what does your day to day look like now? Because we asked you that question earlier and you were still doing maintenance. You were still managing properties. But we do this for time freedom, right? And I think some people forget that. They get into it and they just own a bunch of jobs. So are you still managing your properties? Are you still I was going to say the three of us are not handy, but I think actually Mitch is pretty handy. Gabe and I are not at all. In fact, we would kill ourselves and our loved ones if we tried to be handy, but you are handy. Do you still manage these things? Are you still fixing toilets and things like that?
Yeah, so I'm not fixing any toilets anymore. I'm not doing the turnovers. Like, we've got enough handymen in like our pocket that can help out with that. I've got a partner that helps out with some of that stuff too. As far as managing it, so I still do like manage most of my properties. I brought on a full-time VA about 2 years ago. So she does all the tenant side communication. So I don't talk to tenants anymore. So I can kind of just help with the high level stuff. This last deal we did was our first one that we used third-party management on. So I'm going to just kind of try it out and see how it goes. It's really pushing a lot of control that I'm not used to letting go of, but it's also been kind of nice to not have to worry about those 17 units and what's going on over there.
I turned my properties, as you said, so your 17 unit, all my properties are managed by third party. I turned my properties over to property management when I only had 17 units. But one thing I don't ever share is I actually turned my properties over one property at a time. It was a very slow process. It was like, I'm going to try them out. I'm going to try them out a little more. I'm going to try them out a little more. It was easy for me because I hated property management. I wasn't good at property management, and I could then focus my time and energy putting more deals together. But there was a level of trust for sure. You're entrusting them with millions of dollars of real estate to do something that you've been doing on your own. But there is so much freedom in letting that shit go so you can focus on the big picture.
Yeah. And I'll commend you for this, Gabriel. Like at the last 50 event, you shared like how you don't manage anything and you kind of offloaded a lot of that. And I was in the process of closing on that. And that's kind of what pushed me over. I was like, I should try this out. Just give them one of these deals. And then if it goes well, like I said, you can just keep giving them and maybe give them all of it at some point.
No shit, Grant. That's a lot of pressure knowing that,
if this goes wrong, I'm blaming you.
It's going to go great. If it goes great, you can thank me. If not, I don't know, blame Brandon Turner. So
okay, sounds good.
Yeah. So you mentioned the 50. That's a high level real estate mastermind that you and I are in. I want to know your thoughts about masterminds, community, getting around other high achievers and people that are playing life big, both in real estate and just in life. How much has that contributed to your mindset, your growth, your network, all of it?
Yeah, it's been huge. Like I didn't do a lot of that the first 6-7 years. I just kind of was in my bubble here at home and, did the things around here. And then I kind of started trying to like grow myself and expand. And it's been pretty impactful for me. I don't know if I would have done this 17 deal if I wasn't around you guys in the 50 talking about these great things you're doing. I kind of had the mindset that I didn't belong and I shouldn't be doing those big things. I'm not that big enough yet. And getting around people that are just crushing it in all aspects of life, like it's super motivating. It's well worth it to get around those people, get in the right circles. You know, your network is your net worth. That's always the quote you hear. Like it's very, very true.
I was going to take you back a little bit. Like when you look back on your growth, you've had really, really fast scale, I would describe. I mean, that's very quick to go 4 or 5 years to where you are today. Would you do anything different if you were to start over? Say you're back at the railroad, you have 0 units. Is there something that would have been faster, more efficient, smarter, or you feel like there's not much change there?
That's a good question, Mitch.
That's a very good question.
Travis. Thank
Surprises
you.
me.
Maybe the best. The entire podcast. Maybe the best.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would change much because I feel like we scaled at the right pace. I built it in the beginning like I wanted it in the end. So I feel like we did a fairly good job of that. I probably would have bought more in like 2020 or 2019 if I could, but the path we went, I don't know if I would have changed it. I think it went pretty well.
Yeah.
It's a good question.
Love that.
A great question, Mitch. Again, I just
thank you, Travis. Appreciate it.
That surprised me. That was such a good
Grandpa Travis is proud, and I love that.
I got a question on that 16-plex for you, Grant. Because you're talking about, I have mixed feelings on third-party property managers. Like Mitch and I, we arm wrestle over this. Well, we don't physically arm wrestle because he would throw me through a wall. But metaphorically, we arm wrestle this a little bit about like, because I've had some really bad experiences with third-party property managers. Mitch and I are mostly mobile home park investors. So we've had some bad experiences. There's been some, we also own, or I own some, kind of got into some deals in Oklahoma City, some C-class properties, more affordable housing type stuff. And for and these about 200 units, larger properties. And I've tried like 3 different external property managers and they all literally not fail. They would have to go to night school to learn how to fail even worse. Like it was awful. And so I've had to bring that in-house. But again, Gabe owns 50 units in Oklahoma City and is having success with that. They must like Gabe more than me. They want to hurt me. They hate me. So my thesis is
obviously, I mean, you just answered your own question.
Yeah, you just you don't need, you can just stop now, man. You're good.
Everybody hates me. They want me to fail. Nothing's my fault. It's all everybody else's fault.
Yeah,
the government's fault.
What a mindset.
Yeah, I'm entitled. I take no accountability. No, I'm joking.
Unbelievable.
So Grant, so you're on the third party property manager. My thesis is maybe B class properties seem to be a little more conducive. I do have some A class stuff locally that works. I could see it working better for third party. Are these 16 units? Are they C, B, A? Like tell us a little bit more about these.
Yeah, they're B. Yeah, they're probably mid Bs, just workforce housing. So it's not like they're definitely not class A. They're not class C or Ds, but I would say Bs where they are. So the property manager was already managing the properties when I bought them. And he was actually the broker that was involved on the transaction. So I had a really good relationship with him through the transaction as well. So I felt more comfortable just leaving them with him. Because I have my system set up. I could drop 17 units in there and it wouldn't affect my systems or anything at all. But just the thought process of like, let's try this out for 6 months. And then if it goes well, I would be happy to give him the rest of my stuff.
You mentioned systems, and that's one of the pillars that we talk about in 0 to 100 is operations. It's the least sexy. It's the one I hate talking about, you mentioned systems that you can just sort of drop a 16-plex in, and I'm sure our listeners are going, well, tell me about these systems. Could you sort of just, again, you can't get into the nitty-gritty details. We just don't have the time, but if you were to sort of summarize what these systems look like, I love the fact you brought in a VA, like help educate our listeners on what that might look like.
Yeah, I've been a big systems and process person from the beginning, and I set that up, like I said in the beginning, for what I wanted at the end. So I automated everything I could. I turned everything I did through text messages or emails. Like I hate when my phone rings, and I just don't like it. So I got it all set up that way. Online maintenance orders, online applications, self showings is a huge thing for me. We started that during COVID, but we kept it because it's been great. So setting up those processes has been really important. When I brought my VA on, I took like 2 or 3 weeks, and anytime I was working, I would just screen record what I was doing and talking through what I was doing. So I've got a whole library of my SOPs of what I do for self-management. And that just trained her. She just watched those. I I put some dummy properties in my my property management company, and she would just play around with those, and that helped train her pretty quick.
Well, is it Dan Martell in the
Yep.
what's the name of that book where you
Buy back your time.
Your
I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like how, because a lot of people think writing SOPs for like VAs, and we need to take this medicine a little bit here, Mitch, is that you have to sit down and write these SOPs.
No.
And video is just so much more impactful. Like, why not just do a screen recording, show what you're doing, talk yourself through it, and then you might be able to take that script and run it through AI. That stands for artificial intelligence, Mitch. But run it through AI to where it's sort of like,
thanks, buddy.
So maybe you can create an SOP along with a video, and that, like, how could you get any better than that when helping train like virtual is? Is your VA? Where's your VA located?
The Philippines.
Philippines, yeah.
Yep.
And that's working out well for you.
It's worked out really well. It was my first VA hire, and she's been just a rock star. So I think I hear a lot of horror stories about VAs, and I think I got really lucky, but she's been just phenomenal.
So Grant, I got a question for you. This is more mindset, and Travis knows a lot about this topic, but I want to talk about failure. This is a real question.
That is
this
true.
Is a real question.
That is very true.
So honestly, though, for real, I really see you as like super humble, super like right, not assuming, but like when I really dig in with you, I'm like, your mindset's like rock solid. Like literally, I know the railroad of life. Like to go from that to where you are now, I'm super impressed. So like, how do you deal with failure? How do you deal with like, things going wrong, things going sideways, people failing inside your organization? Like, what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, I just take each failure as like a lesson. So like I've screwed up a lot in property management. In some purchases we paid too much or whatever, but I take it as a lesson and I just learn from it and do it differently next time. Like last winter, we had a new snow removal company. I just thought it was going to be all right. It's fine. They're going to come do the driveways. They came at like a different time than my other one. So I was just getting texts from my tenants constantly, like, where's the snow people? We can't get out, blah, 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 blah. So I just sent out a message a day of like, hey, we have the same snow people. We are on their list, but I can't control once the snow falls when they show up. So have patience with them, have patience with me. We're going to get through it. You guys got out last year. So it's just like preemptively doing those things again. I did, from what I feel like a lot of my failures are just like in my property management of not doing things properly on the front end and setting the right standards. Something that I've kind of realized, like in the beginning of my property management, I was like lightning fast response. It didn't matter if it was Saturday night and they were texting me. I'm like, oh, well, yeah, what do you need? That's a failure. Like you are training your tenants that you are there 24/7. So setting up those boundaries of like, these are the office hours. If you have an emergency, call me, but I'm not going to talk to you about, your light bulb being burnt out on Saturday night. Like that's not a responsible conversation. It's not healthy for me because then I'm on all the time, So setting up those things, setting the things right in the beginning. I'm going to fail. Like people are going to screw up. That's fine. But take that failure and then learn from it and make sure it doesn't happen again.
A lot of people don't realize that like a huge successful, say, business or portfolio or whatever that journey is just made up of tons of failures and iterations. And so people look at you or us or whatever, and they're like, oh man, your life, everything's perfect. Your portfolio is everything's perfect. It's like, it's a constant small failures inside of a larger success, and then iterating upon that, I think is interesting. So anyway, I love that topic.
Also, successful entrepreneurs, which is what we are, or entrepreneurs or real estate investors, they kind of thrive on failures a little bit. They're kind of sick. We're all a little twisted because, like you said, I see it as a learning experience, but we also kind of like it. We like solving problems. And when you solve, it's like you get into the gamification mode, right? Like, okay, well, how can I solve this? How can I leverage my network? How can I leverage debt or equity, or like, what can we do to fix that? Also, something I wanted to make sure that I didn't gloss over. You said this twice, 2 or 3 times now. You said, start with the end in mind. And I love that because I think a lot of people sort of like accidentally make the next step and they sort of put together this Frankenstein of systems, and we're guilty of that as well. And because you're obviously a lot smarter than us, but you're like, I'm going to start with the end in mind. I know exactly what this is going to look like. These are my systems. This is my cash flow. This is how my technology stack, et cetera. And we have an exercise we run our elite or our 0 to 100 tribe people through, like, it's called the vivid vision, which is like, this is what my perfect life looks like. But also get granular about like exactly how your systems work. And then that way you know what the end result or the end goal looks like. So I love that you said that.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to the failure thing. Like each one, like my end in mind was every time I was frustrated by something, I'm like, okay, how do I make this so it never frustrates me again? And then I put that system in place. So it's really not the only time I would say it's a failure is if you don't fix it. If it happens 2 or 3 times, then that's a failure. Everything else is just a learning curve.
But also, you just said you put a system in place so it doesn't happen again. Where a lot of people they'll react to it. They're like, "Oh, that was really stressful," and they keep moving, and then the next year, next month, it happens again. Versus being like, "No, how do I not ever do that again?" It's like the culture of becoming better through systems and processes versus just being reactionary. So I love that.
And we're taught not to fail, by the way. We're taught not to fail. Like every time I take my kids to school, I'm like, "Hey, is it okay to fail?" And they're like, "Yeah, like fail forward, like make mistakes, take risks," because I know they're going to walk to those school doors and they're going to be told, don't make mistakes, don't fail. And I do think that's handicapping a lot of our younger generation. And if you're not in the ring, like if you're not swinging the hammer, you're not in the ring fighting, you're not going to have success. And so you need to embrace those failures.
Yeah, I think it was Sarah Blakely. She was talking about her dad every night at dinner. He'd ask her, like, "What'd you fail at today?" And the concept was, if you're not failing at something at school or sports or whatever that is, then you're not putting yourself out there. You're not trying hard enough. If you're just always succeeding, then you're not being uncomfortable. So anyway, that was kind of inspirational.
Notice how quiet Gabe is. Notice how quiet Gabe is to this part of the podcast because we're talking about failure. She's like, I don't know. I don't understand. I don't understand what that looks
like.
Seeing
him with the shirt off. I mean, holy smokes.
Yeah, that's not a failure. Let's be honest.
No, I've had my fair share. I think that every failure is an opportunity for growth in all aspects of life. And I mean, it makes me think, like, when I identify a problem, my brain has to go to solution mode because you hang out in that problem mode too long. Like there's no benefit, right? So it's a lot of real estate investing is problem solving and how you react to those issues when they come up, because shit happens in real estate. At the end of the day, I'm sure glad I own some real estate, because when those problems come up, real estate can help solve a lot of those problems. Grant, I know we're near the top of the hour, but I did want to ask you. You talked about vision a little bit. I'm curious. You've built an amazing real estate portfolio. You've been able to capitalize on having both financial freedom and time freedom. I'm curious to what your vision is for the next year, 2 years, 3 years. When you picture your life, say 3 years from today, what does that look like, both professionally and personally?
That's a good question. So I would say, like, professionally, I'm less involved day to day on the property management. I still do have a lot of the communication with my VA. So if I could be less involved with that, if I'm still in the property management, or maybe I'm in third parties. So I would say professionally is going to be out of the property management more, either running that company or having someone else do it. And still just scaling with boring cash flow in real estate is what I'm going to be doing. Personally, my kids are 10 and 8, so we're at a fun age where we're doing a lot of sports, a lot of fun traveling, and just keep giving them experiences and having fun with them.
That's awesome. Those are fun ages. I'm at 10 and 7 right now, so it's a ton of fun.
Yeah.
So Grant, we have one final question that we ask all our guests on the show. Travis, Mitch, you want to ask the final 0 to 100 podcast question?
Travis, do it. You got it, man.
Go, Travis, go.
Before you press record, Grant's like, "Hey, is there any questions you're going to ask me that I need to prepare for?" And we're like, "Yes, there are, but we don't tell you." But because we like to surprise you on this. So, okay, so this is Grant. You lost everything, right? You lost everything. Maybe you still have your house. Maybe you're homeless. Maybe you're sleeping. Your family's sleeping on your buddy's couch. Like, you've lost everything. You've also lost your network. So all the people, everybody's, oh, shit.
Yeah, he's like, oh, shit.
This question just got way harder.
Just call Gabriel and ask him a
that
question.
Just got real.
No, you don't know Gabe. Gabe doesn't know you. He won't take your call. He'll send you straight to voicemail and then delete the voicemail. So you don't know anybody, and but you still have your knowledge. You have all of your experience. What do you do to rebuild? What do you do that first day? What do you do the first week, the first month, the first year?
I sit down and I write down what I want. Like, what am I doing? Like, I set the goals, and they need to be definable. Like they always say, call SMART goals. Actionable, measurable, goals that I can achieve. And And then I would probably just lean back on my physical like labor. Like I'll just go be a GC and start grinding back that way and build capital to do what I know I can do.
So you will find deals and find capital and pair the deal and the capital together and create value.
Yep.
He also said he'd write his goals down. So getting clear on, again,
get super clear
why,
on that.
your vision. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's a tough question because you gotta eat too, you know? So it's like,
Right.
okay, go be a GC, get some food money, but then also go find those deals. Anyway, yeah, I love
For
that.
those of you that are like, that want some guides on, because I go back and forth. Sometimes I'm great at goals. Sometimes I'm bad at goals. To plug Brandon Turner's intention journal. It's pretty awesome. I just picked that back up and it's great for setting goals and writing out what you're trying to do and getting clarity around that. So
We should have a 0 to 100 journal called like the real intention journal, the extreme intention journal,
the better
better-
intention
the better-
journal.
the better
life
than
intention
Brandon's
journal.
intention journal.
Well, there's this
Maybe
thing
the
called
Better Life Intention Journal by
Bigger
0 to 100.
Pockets Publishing. I don't know who Bigger Pockets is. There's this publishing
Yeah.
thing on the bottom. Okay, anyway.
Hopefully they're doing okay. Anyway,
Yeah. hopefully hey Grant, man, thank you so. Great question, great answer. By the way, you won. That was the right answer. I'm joking.
You
There's no right
won.
answer.
Cool.
Hey, you
Yeah.
won. Good
Yeah,
job.
you won. Winner, chicken dinner for
You
Grant.
win.
Right. Man,
Hey.
thank you so much for your time. I'm excited to get to know you, meet you in person. Excited to see your success. I think we're all. I think we could sum it up by saying like you're just a great person, man. You're a great guy, and I think I want to do business. In fact, I'm going to go find a property to sell you because I like you so much.
Do it. I love it. Yeah, man. Appreciate it, guys.